You got in your car this morning. You turned a key. You pressed a pedal. Without a single muscle working overtime, you were doing 40 miles an hour. That same trip, 100,000 years ago, would have taken 2 full days of walking, barefoot, through territory that could kill you before lunch. No road, no path, no sign warning you what was over that ridge. And the thing waiting over that ridge? It had claws for almost all of human history. For roughly 300,000 years, the only transportation technology a human being ever had was this, their own 2 feet. And somehow, that was enough to take us everywhere. 70,000 years ago, our ancestors were locked inside a single corner of Africa. Today, we are on every continent, in every climate, on islands in the middle of oceans that have no business having humans on them. So the question isn't just how did we get there? The question is, what kind of creature even attempts that? This is not just a history lesson. This is the greatest survival story ever told. And it starts with something embarrassingly simple. Your feet. Before we start walking the ancient world together, if you're the kind of person who wants to know how everything actually got started, hit that subscribe button right now. Half Evolved exists to dig up the stories that shaped every single thing you take for granted today. Turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the next expedition. Let's be honest about what you are. You are not fast. A cheetah hits 70 miles an hour. A horse sustains 30 for miles without breaking a sweat. You top out at maybe 15, and only for about 4 seconds before your lungs are staging a protest. But speed was never the point. You are not built to be fast. You are built to never stop. Walk 20 miles today. Sleep. Walk 20 miles tomorrow, and the day after, and the week after. No other animal on this planet can do that. Wolves give up. Horses overheat. Bears sit down. You keep going. Your feet have arches that function as biological springs. Your Achilles tendon stores and releases energy with every single step, so your muscles don't carry the full load. There is a ligament running up the back of your neck that stabilizes your skull while your body moves underneath it. A feature unique to bipedal walkers. And you have roughly 2 million sweat glands that keep you cool, while every other large mammal on the savanna overheats and stops. You are a persistence hunting machine. Your ancestors didn't outrun prey. They followed it for hours, sometimes days, in the midday heat that killed every other predator. The animal eventually collapsed from heat exhaustion. You just walked up to it. In 1978, paleoanthropologist Mary Leakey found something in Tanzania that stopped the world. Pressed into volcanic ash that had hardened 3.6 million years ago. A trail of footprints, two individuals walking upright, side by side. The oldest evidence of bipedal walking ever discovered. And here is the part that never stops hitting. Those footprints look almost exactly like yours. For millions of years, that stride was all we had, and it was enough to set the stage for everything that came next. Starting roughly 70,000 years ago, something shifted. Climate pressure, shrinking resources. Or maybe just the deeply human instinct that said, there is something over that horizon, and I need to know what it is. Small groups began pushing outward. Not in one dramatic march. This happened across thousands of years, generation by generation, each group moving just a little further than the last. They didn't have a destination. They were just following the next meal. Here is the route most of them took, the coast. Archaeologists call it the Beachcomber Highway. By hugging the shorelines of the Arabian Peninsula and the Indian subcontinent, these early travelers had a guaranteed food source: shellfish. You don't need to hunt a shellfish. You don't need to outsmart it. You just pick it up. That steady protein supply made coastal migration possible in a way that crossing open desert or dense jungle simply wasn't. And they weren't wandering randomly. Don't make that mistake. Archaeologists have found obsidian tools hundreds of miles from the nearest volcanic source. Amber traded across entire mountain ranges. Shells found hundreds of miles inland. These people were networking. They knew things existed in specific places because someone who had been there told someone else, who told someone else across generations. They carried a collective map inside their stories. From Africa, they pushed into the Middle East, across Asia, into Europe, and eventually, impossibly, into Siberia. 15. Stop. 2 miles of walking across landscapes no human eye had ever seen. Without knowing the destination even existed, here is something that rewrites the way you think about the Americas. Humans didn't cross a bridge to get there. They crossed a continent, a frozen, wind-blasted, predator-filled continent called Beringia. Exposed when Ice Age sea levels dropped low enough to reveal the floor of the Bering Sea. It was hundreds of miles wide. The conditions were incomprehensible. Minus 40 degrees, whiteout storms, short-faced bears that stood 12 feet tall. And yet, they made it through. How? 2 things. Fire, which they had mastered long before this journey began. And something that doesn't get nearly enough credit, tailored clothing. Bone needles found in Siberia. 50. Tell us that ancient humans weren't just wrapping themselves in pelts. They were sewing fitted garments. Parkas with sealed seams, layered insulation. The invention of the parka was, without exaggeration, just as critical to human expansion as the invention of the wheel. Without high-performance cold-weather gear made from animal fur, the journey to the New World ends in Siberia. Nobody makes it across. These weren't desperate, shivering refugees. They were cold climate specialists. And once they crossed into Alaska, they kept going, all the way to the southern tip of South America. 10,000 miles more, in roughly 1,000 years. That pace still staggers researchers today. Everything we've talked about so far has involved land. And then humans hit water, and water changed everything. In 2003, archaeologists on the island of Flores in Indonesia found stone tools dating back 800,000 years. Here is the problem with that number. Flores has never, not once, been connected to the mainland, not during any ice age, not at any sea level. There was always at least 12 miles of open ocean between that island and the nearest land, which means those tools could only be there for one reason. Someone crossed. We don't know what they floated on. Wood rots. Reed decomposes. Whatever vessel carried them across is long gone, but the tools are there. The crossing happened. And then, 65, Susan years ago, humans crossed from Southeast Asia to Australia. That was not a 12-mile hop. That was at minimum 60 miles of open ocean. You cannot see Australia from the other side. You cannot drift there by accident. The currents run the wrong way. Someone built something that could float, looked out at open water with no visible end, and paddled into it anyway. Sit with that for a second. They left solid ground with no evidence that anything existed on the other side. But the most insane chapter of human navigation came later. Starting around 3,000 years ago, the Polynesians crossed the Pacific Ocean, the largest body of water on Earth. They built double-hulled voyaging canoes, loaded them with food, animals, fresh water, and entire families, and sailed thousands of miles into open ocean. No compass, no map, no instruments. They navigated using the stars, The direction of ocean swells felt against the hull, the flight patterns of birds, the color of clouds forming over invisible land. They reached Hawaii, Easter Island, New Zealand, every habitable island in the Pacific. Some of those journeys covered 20,500 miles of open water with nothing in between. It is the most impressive feat of navigation in the history of our species, and it was done entirely in human heads. Walking conquered land. Boats conquered water. But there was still a problem nobody had solved. You can walk 20 miles. You cannot walk 20 miles, carrying a 200-pound animal you just killed. For most of human history, the limit on transportation wasn't distance. It was weight. Your body can manage maybe 40 to 60 pounds before it starts breaking down. So humans got creative. First, dragging. Kill something big, throw it on a hide, haul it back to camp. We know they did this. Archaeologists found wear marks on ancient hides that only appear when something heavy has been dragged a very long way. Then someone invented the travois. Two long poles tied in a V shape with a platform slung between them. Drag the narrow end. The wide end carries the load. One person could suddenly move over 100 pounds. Simple physics. Radical upgrade. Then they found a better solution. The dog. Around 15,000 years ago. The first animal ever domesticated, and one of the first jobs humans gave them was hauling weight. In the Arctic, dog teams pulled sleds across ice and snow. 6 dogs could transport an entire family's camp, but dogs are small. We needed something bigger. Around 5,500 years ago, on the steppes of what is now Kazakhstan, a people called the Botai did something that changed civilization forever. They tamed the horse. Archaeologists found the evidence, wear marks on horse teeth from bits. Mare's milk baked into pottery. These weren't people hunting horses. They were riding them, milking them, building entire lives around them. And the impact was instant and total. For 300,000 years, the fastest a human could travel was roughly 4 miles per hour. Walking speed. On horseback, 30. In a single generation, the human world got 8 times smaller. Armies could reach you before you knew they were coming. Trade routes stretched thousands of miles. Messages that once took weeks arrived in days. Everything we call civilization. Every empire, every trade network, every cultural exchange was built on the back of a horse. Here is the fact that breaks everyone's brain the first time they hear it. Humans crossed every ocean on Earth before anyone invented the wheel. The oldest known wheel turned up in the Ljubljana marshes of Slovenia, roughly 5,200 years old. Meanwhile, boats go back at least 10,000 years. Horses were tamed 5,500 years ago. Humans sailed to Australia 65,000 years before that wheel ever existed. The wheel was one of the last major transportation inventions in human history. Not the first, not even close. And it didn't even start as transportation. The first wheels were potter's wheels, spinning discs for shaping clay. At some point, someone turned that disc on its side and had a thought, what if something sits on top of this? That was the moment. Early wheeled vehicles were slow and heavy. Solid wooden wheels cracked on rough ground and sank in mud. A horse without a cart was honestly faster than a horse pulling one. But around 2000 BC, someone engineered the spoked wheel. Lighter, stronger, faster. Now you had chariots. Speed and cargo capacity at the same time. Then came roads. The first paved road we know of was built in the city of around 4000 BC. And when you combined wheels, roads, and horses, all three, working together, you finally had something that looked like a real transportation system. trade exploded. Empires became possible. Armies and supplies could move hundreds of miles without everything falling apart. The wheel, the horse, the road. That combination built every civilization you have ever heard of. Neanderthals were stronger than us. Denisovans were better adapted to altitude. Both groups had been around longer. Both had survived ice ages. So why did we travel the world while they stayed in their territories? The answer isn't physical. It never was. It's social. We had what researchers call the social brain. We didn't just accumulate individual knowledge. We shared it across groups, across generations, across hundreds of miles. A group in one valley knew what a group 3 valleys over had discovered because someone talked about it. Someone told a story. Someone remembered. We carried the GPS of our ancestors' experiences inside our oral traditions. That network meant that when any group of humans encountered a new obstacle, a mountain range, an ocean, a desert, they weren't starting from zero. They had generations of accumulated wisdom to draw on. Neanderthals may have had fire. They may have had tools. But the evidence strongly suggests they didn't have this: the ability to think and plan and problem solve as a distributed collective across vast distances. We did. And that is why this is our planet. Here is the full picture. For 300,000 years, humans had nothing but their legs, and they used those legs to walk across an entire planet. They hit water and figured out how to float. They needed to carry more weight, and they learned to drag. Then to build, then to partner with animals. They tamed the horse, and the world got 8 times smaller overnight. They invented the wheel, and it got smaller again. And every one of those breakthroughs, every single one, was built on top of the last one, solving problems that would have seemed like miracles to anyone who came before. Now you sit in a metal box on a paved road doing 70 miles an hour, and you call it a commute. You fly 3,000 miles across an ocean in 6 hours, and you're annoyed the Wi-Fi is slow. Stop. You have a machine in your pocket that can summon a car to your exact location in 4 minutes, and you're irritated when it takes 5. Your ancestors walked barefoot for 15. Stop. Zeros and miles across continents they couldn't name, to reach places they had never seen, to find resources that no one in their group had ever touched. They did it because staying still meant dying, because the horizon meant something, because they were built, in their feet, in their lungs, in their insatiable social brains, to go. Every highway, every airport, every shipping lane and train track and trade route on this planet exists because 300,000 years ago, some barefoot human looked at the horizon and started walking. They didn't know where they were going. They had no map. They had no guarantee of survival. They went anyway. And that right there, is the most human thing there is. If this journey moved you, and if you want to keep going, check out our next video on the mystery of the first Americans. I'm your guide on Half Evolved, and the expedition never stops.